We are back in Mike Rooney's car for the second part of our demonstration as far as how the electrical system works. We did not cover in detail the trans brake and the line lock functions as in depth as we could have, so we're going to try to clean that up a little bit and explain that to Mike. So we'll start with the line lock again. We first have to make sure, obviously, the car is running. We have our key turned on, our ignition power turned on. Bear with me here, we have refused the fuel pump, so it's going to be noisy for a moment. Now, the fuel pump only runs for a few seconds until you activate the starter, so it does enough to prime the system as a conventional car does. So don't be concerned with the fuel pump shutting off when you activate the ignition switch, but it will turn on. If it does not turn on, it will immediately turn on when you hit the starter button, but either way it should turn on. So we're going to energize the accessory side, which turns on the line lock button and turns on the trans brake. Now, the line lock is used when you're in the water box, where you typically want to do a tire clean, a tire cook, and then you will drive it out of the water under power. And this is all prior to staging the car at the starting line. Now, the starting line, the trans brake is used when you are preparing to launch the car under power. And we'll go over that shortly, but first we'll go over the line lock. Now, again, as we've discussed before, prior to applying the button, we will pump the brake, hold the pedal hard, then you would hold the button, release the pedal, the brake pedal. Now your foot is free to activate the throttle to any particular RPM you're looking for. Okay, you can see the function of the throttle. Now, at this particular time, you have a rev chip that is in that particular two-step module, and that may be set at, let's say, 4,000 RPM. Now, while that button is depressed, you can literally put the gas pedal on the floor, but as soon as it hits 4,000 RPM, it will go into a rev control. So you may just basically want to feather the throttle at that point, because there's no reason to senselessly bury your throttle in with full throttle, because you'll just it's just a waste. So at that point, you will literally drive the throttle until you reach that 4,000, until you're just basically blipping the rev limiter. And once the tires have reached a point of grabbing, where they feel as if they are no longer slipping in the water, you release the button and throttle hard and drive the car out onto the dry asphalt, getting the tires, completing the cleaning of the tires. Once that is finished, you will approach the staging lanes, stage the car according to the Christmas tree. Once that is finished, you have two options. You can still use the line lock in conjunction so that you don't drift through the lights, but a lot of people don't do that. It's preference. The other side of this is, now at this particular point, your foot pedal, you have held the car into a position, you have staged the car, and now you will apply the trans brake. Now hold the trans brake, and at that point you can take your foot and apply your throttle. Again, it has a separate rev control chip. Now you may want to launch the car at 5,500 RPM. Now you can bury the throttle at this point, and wide open throttle, it will sit there and blipper away at the rev limiter at 5,500, and as soon as you release the button, the RPM is released and now allowed to go higher, so you literally are leaving the starting line at 5,500 RPM, and it is accelerating up the RPM band to peak RPM, which will have your shift point. Now, your shift point is reached. There is also a rev limiter on your max RPM for the motor safety side of this, and that may be set at 7,500 RPM. So once you have released the trans brake, the car is launched, and at that point the car accelerates through the RPM band. You shift the car accordingly for every particular gear, and if you attempt to go over that 7,500 RPM, you will now hit the rev limiter, and you'll know that you've passed that. Now, this particular car does not have a shift light. We've not installed one of those as of now, but I believe that's something we may add down in the future. But there is a tachometer if you wanted to watch his tach, or he can just basically shift it when he just feels the blip of the rev limiter. Many people attempt that as well. So at that point, you've just experienced the trans brake line lock controls during a drag racing launch and tire cleaning process. I'm sure, Mike, you'll have more questions as time progresses, but that's just basically a preliminary as to what we see. All right, take care.